The third-floor corridors of the Rayburn House office building were cloaked in midnight stillness, the kind of quiet that settles when even the janitors stop humming. Only the faint creak of century-old floorboards and the soft patter of rain against the windows broke the silence. But in room 312, beneath the flickering glow of a fluorescent panel, Congressman Byron Donalds stood motionless. His hands rested on a desk that had witnessed decades of briefings, deals, and whispered secrets. Behind him, a printer groaned, spitting out page after page, as if choking on the weight of what it revealed. Donalds didn't look up. He didn't need to. He already knew what was coming. When the printer coughed out its final sheet, the paper drifted onto the desk. Donalds picked it up. Boston Mayoral Election 2021 Campaign Donor Spreadsheet. At the top, a name, Gary Yu. Beside it, a figure, $300,000. Affiliation, New England Chinese-American Alliance. But Donalds's eyes lingered not on the number nor the name, but on the line just beneath. United Front Work Department, PRC Intelligence Arm. This was no typo. This wasn't just a donation. This was a signal. His phone buzzed. The screen read, "Unknown caller." He answered without hesitation. "Congressman," came a voice cold and clipped. "We traced the thumb drive. The file wasn't leaked. It was intercepted, pulled mid-transfer from a secured DNC server." Donalds's brow furrowed. "Meaning?" he asked, his tone not impatient but razor-sharp. "Meaning," the voice replied, "someone didn't want it archived. They wanted it buried." Donalds said nothing. His thumb grazed the Sharpie in his pocket, then drew it out. He underlined a single word on the printout: concealment. His voice, when it came, was slow, deliberate, as if the words needed to sear their way out. "They want to play no questions asked on sanctuary policy? Fine. But if they're laundering that under foreign money with no oversight—" He held the page aloft. "We're not talking immigration anymore. We're talking national security." The silence on the line grew heavy, almost tangible. "And Michelle Wu?" the caller asked. Donalds's jaw tightened. "She just went from mayor to material witness." He hung up. The printer spat out one last sheet. He slid it into a manila folder, the front typed in bold, "For review, Committee on Homeland Security, April 21st, hearing." He walked to the window. Rain tapped faintly against the glass, rhythmic, persistent, like someone knocking. Outside, the city blinked in amber and blue, unaware of the truth he held, a truth that could shatter podiums when spoken aloud. Somewhere, a clock began counting down, not just to a hearing, but to a confrontation. Not between parties, but between narratives, between what was said and what was hidden in plain sight. The news didn't break with fanfare. It crept into inboxes, slithered through encrypted servers. No CNN chyrons, no dramatic countdown clocks. Just a crisp white envelope, hand-delivered at 7:42 a.m. Tom Homan, former ICE director and newly reinstated as border czar under the Trump administration, cracked it open without ceremony. He'd seen enough subpoenas in his lifetime to know this one was different. Stamped across the header in bold serif, Committee on Homeland Security, Notice of Appearance Required. Beneath it, a single line: Inquiry into Federal Compliance and Sanctuary City Enforcement, with particular reference to Boston. At the bottom, a name: Congressman Byron Donalds, lead questioner. Homan folded the letter, slid it back into the envelope, and muttered, "They're not wasting time." His office, a sparse room in the Department of Homeland Security, felt colder than usual. The weight of the moment wasn't lost on him. This wasn't just a hearing. It was a reckoning. 3 hours later, in a strategic briefing room paneled in dark walnut, Homan sat across from Donald's. The table between them could seat 20, but only their 2 chairs were occupied. A leather-bound binder rested on the table, its numbered tabs and confidential index marking it as serious business. No TikTok filters, no Comic Sans. Donald's flipped it open to tab 4 Wu. "We pulled her campaign disclosures," he said, his voice steady but taut. "Something's off. Not just the amount. The source. $300,000 bundled, same network that flags under United Front Operations." Homan didn't flinch. His hands, clasped tightly, betrayed no surprise. "And sanctuary protections on top of that," he said. "She's giving services to people she can't name. No IDs, no verification. If one of them harms a citizen, no one will ever know who they were. That's not incompetence. That's engineered ambiguity." Donalds nodded, tapping the binder with a deliberate finger. "Here's what worries me. We're not just talking mismanaged city funds. We're talking systemic concealment, federal dollars flowing into black holes. This hearing isn't about politics. It's about sovereignty. Either we protect it or we forfeit it, one sanctuary city at a time." Homan leaned back, his eyes narrowing. "I'm ready. No slogans." Donalds's lips twitched, not quite a smile. "Only facts," Homan replied, "and maybe a few photos they're hoping never see daylight." That evening, the digital world stirred. At exactly 9 p.m., headlines flashed across live streams, podcast feeds, and Instagram reels. "Michelle Wu under fire again." A popular commentator, sharp-suited and brimming with partisan polish, leaned into his microphone. "They say Boston's a sanctuary city," he grinned, not for the camera, but for the crowd he knew was nodding. "Maybe, or maybe it's something else entirely." A clip played. Wu, mid-sentence, hands poised, brow furrowed, as Donalds leaned across a bench, a pen tapping like a metronome counting down to confrontation. The footage was grainy from a year ago, but unmistakable. Policy colliding with principle, sound bites wrapped in barely veiled contempt. But what the internet watched now wasn't a rerun. It was a prequel. Miles away, beneath the Capitol's rotunda, the same 2 names were set to clash again. This time, the stakes were higher. This wasn't about sparring on television. This was about answering under oath. And Byron Donalds wasn't walking in to make a point. He was walking in to make a case. The hearing room was a study in orchestrated silence. Polished hardwood floors gleamed under velvet curtains, drawn just enough to let in light but keep out noise. Microphones stood sentinel, listening harder than they spoke. Behind the witness table, the seal of the United States glared like a judge who'd seen too much. Michelle Wu didn't wait for an introduction. She didn't need the room's permission, only its attention. She rose smoothly, posture straight, fingers interlaced above a printed statement she never glanced at. "Chairman, members of the committee," she began, her voice calm, measured, surgically calibrated for the cameras. "Thank you for the opportunity to address not just questions, but assumptions." She let the word sanctuary hang in the air like a challenge. "I come here not as a symbol or a scapegoat, but as the elected mayor of Boston, an immigrant city, a resilient city, and yes, a sanctuary city. There has been speculation, some of it reckless, about how we manage our budget. Some have asked for exact numbers spent on undocumented residents. To them, I say, we don't assign dollar signs to human worth. We don't sort our neighbors by status before delivering services. A pause, not awkward, but intentional. In Boston, a mother fleeing violence still gets shelter. A child without papers still gets a seat in school. A man afraid to call 911 still gets protection. That's not ideology, that's governance. She sat down, poised, silent, not as someone under scrutiny, but as someone who'd delivered the first strike. Byron Donalds didn't flinch. He opened a folder, not quickly, but with the unhurried precision of a surgeon before the first incision. "Madame Mayor," he said, his voice calm, "you say you don't distinguish between documented and undocumented individuals when budgeting services. But when does no distinction become no accountability?" He slid a page to the clerk. "For the record, this committee has reviewed budget filings from New York City and Boston. New York reported $6.9 billion in taxpayer spending tied to undocumented immigration, schooling, emergency care, legal aid, housing vouchers, verified, line by line." His eyes returned to Wu. "Yet Boston, according to your office, has no such breakdown. Not even a rough estimate. Just a sentence. We don't ask immigration status." No one's accusing you of hiding numbers, but I find it curious that an administration touting its 8AA bond rating hasn't released a line-item analysis on how sanctuary policies are funded. If you're managing your budget so well, surely you have the numbers, even if you choose not to name them. A murmur rippled through the gallery. Wu opened her mouth, but Donalds raised a finger. Not rudely, just enough to signal this wasn't the moment for deflection. He reached for a second folder. Disclosures, Mayor Wu Campaign 2021. This is a filing from the New England Chinese-American Alliance. It shows that in 2021, that organization helped raise over $300,000 for your campaign. Bundled contributions, mostly cash, mostly from small, untraceable donors. Wu sat straighter, her hands curling her statement into a tighter roll. "That group's co-chair," Donalds continued, "is Gary Yu. According to the House Select Committee on the CCP, Mr. Yu is listed as an affiliate of the United Front Work Department, the same Chinese Communist Party division known for influencing foreign officials, laundering narratives, and covertly funding overseas campaigns." The room's tension hardened. "I'm not saying you knew, I'm not saying you intended, but when $300,000 comes through a network linked to foreign intelligence and your office responds with silence, that's not optics, that's vulnerability." The pause that followed was heavy, the kind that shifts a room's gravity. Then a new presence rose. Tom Homan stood, not rushed, not rattled, but with the unmistakable weight of a man who'd spent a career in colder rooms with higher stakes. No podium, no slideshow, just a binder, a reputation, and a name that sparked cheers or jeers, depending on the cable network. "Madame Mayor," Homan began, laying a document on the table. The screen behind him lit up. United Front Work Department, CCP Intelligence Operations. This is not a community outreach group. This is an intelligence arm of the Chinese Communist Party. Their mission: influence elections, infiltrate civil societies, skirt legal thresholds while rewriting political norms from the inside out. The screen split. On the left, a 2021 campaign flyer featuring Wu and the Alliance. On the right, a House report naming the group as a conduit for CCP influence. "I know what you'll say," Homan continued. "You didn't know. You don't control every dollar. But I've seen this playbook before. The United Front doesn't show up with flags. They show up with checks. They embed in cultural groups, trade associations, nonprofits. Then they buy proximity to power." He stepped forward, closing the space. "You're not just a mayor, Ms. Wu. You're a policy architect. And when your city refuses cooperation with federal agencies, obscures identities, and funnels services without scrutiny, you're a high-value target for those who want America distracted, divided, and blind." Wu spoke, her voice steady but thinner. "I do not screen every donor. Contributions were disclosed per regulations. I followed the law." Homan's eyes didn't waver. "Following the law is not the same as serving the country." He placed a leaked memo on the desk, praising Boston's strategic non-cooperation as a model for urban autonomy. "They're not celebrating your compassion, Madame Mayor. They're studying your gaps." The screen shifted to a face, a young woman, no name in the caption. "This is Alejandra," Homan said softly, 16, walking home from tutoring when she was pulled into a van by two men with no identification, no record, because the city that released them never recorded who they were. ICE had issued detainers, but the sanctuary ordinance said no. 1 week later, they tortured her in a warehouse outside Tacoma. Gasps didn't come. What came was quieter, a pencil dropping, a mother in the gallery pressing a tissue to her lips. The next slide, a name tag, an obituary. Dr. Michael Reyes, pediatric oncologist, stabbed in his clinic by a patient's uncle, released under a non-cooperation clause. Homan let the image linger. This isn't about numbers. It's about names, about who we failed to count until they showed up in a headline or a funeral program. He turned to Wu. "You said fear makes cities less safe. You're right. But fear also comes from inaction, from protecting the unknown at the cost of the known." Wu leaned forward as if to respond, but Homan raised a hand. $300,000 bought your campaign oxygen, but it didn't buy you this moment. These names, these stories, they don't get sanitized. They don't get scrubbed from the memory of families who just wanted their kids to come home. The screen went black. Donald spoke. "Madame Mayor, I ask again, not as a congressman, but as a father. When a city chooses not to ask who it's serving, what happens when it serves the wrong person?" Wu said nothing. Homan didn't sit. He stood, one hand on the binder, not as restraint, but as confirmation. "There's a line," he said. "Sanctuary cities dance up to it, insisting they're choosing compassion over compliance. But when you shield, conceal, obstruct, intentionally or not, you cross that line. And under federal statute, that's not a debate. It's a felony." The word felony cut through the room. A Reuters reporter typed furiously. A CNN correspondent removed their earpiece, choosing to listen. Homan continued, "If this were just policy, we'd be having a policy debate. But this is about Title 8, Section 1324, harboring, shielding, obstructing enforcement. Those who enable it, by negligence or design, are liable. And this administration is done letting it slide." Donalds leaned forward. "Boston doesn't need a mayor who hides spreadsheets. It doesn't need a mayor who opens its arms to foreign influence while closing its eyes to consequences." He laid two documents side by side. Wu's campaign disclosure and a United Front memo praising her sanctuary framework. "The question isn't whether you knew, it's whether you cared." The chairman turned. Mayor Wu, do you wish to respond? She blinked, her breath catching. These documents, I wasn't shown those before today, she said, her voice faltering. You're connecting dots that don't represent how the city works. A final whisper. This isn't fair. Cameras zoomed in. A flashbulb popped. A Republican senator whispered to an aide. She just collapsed without a word. The hearing ended, but the storm it ignited roared on. Within 6 hours, hashtags dominated the national feed. Number who funded Wu, number Boston deserves answers, number sanctuary for who. By midday, they were front-page news. The Washington Post, the Boston Globe, and the Atlantic ran urgent online editions. Across Boston's campus bulletin boards, flyers appeared. Did she ever speak for us? At 3:20 p.m., the Congressional Ethics Committee announced a formal inquiry into Wu's 2021 campaign. At 4:17 p.m., Harvard Kennedy School paused its joint policy initiative with her administration, citing public trust. By nightfall, 2 senior aides resigned, one leaving a post-it. We didn't sign up for this, but the image that defined the moment was a 19-second video, grainy, filmed from across the street. Wu exited City Hall through a staff door, no aides, no media, just a coat clutched tightly, her face rigid. Captioned, "When the applause ends, you hear everything else." It went viral in an hour, shared by influencers who once praised her, now silent. In City Hall's press room, the podium stood unused, the digital screen frozen on one word, cancelled. Wu's nameplate was gone. Outside, a crowd gathered, not angry, but watchful, holding signs. Transparency means numbers. Who wrote the checks? Interviews followed. Former staffers, community leaders, even her party hesitated. She started with good intentions, one said. The money thing never sat right, said another. A public radio voice summed it up. Michelle Wu didn't fall in one day. She vanished in plain sight. One unasked question, one unverified donation, one sanctuary declaration at a time. Trust doesn't die from a lie. It dies when those meant to speak stop speaking. In today's politics, it's not the scandal that ends you. It's the silence after.